Do you think I'll be able to make my first feature film before I turn 40? I'm about 50. You think it's gonna take that long for things to change? Sean Baker's latest speech at the SAG Awards really hit me very hard as a fellow indie filmmaker. Sean is undoubtedly a very successful filmmaker, and he, despite all his success, despite the fact that he's Sean fucking Baker, like his name commands some weight. Like he has some weight to it already, and yet he is still struggling to find financing for films and to maintain creative freedom on his. So many times these days we hear like, oh, like we are not going to fund your film because there's no commercial viability, because there's no people don't want to take a chance on your films, like on indie films, especially indie art house films, because they don't think there's a market for it. And that's very understandable, but it also hurts because it also is like you don't really know until you take a chance on it. I say it's understandable in the sense that I get it. It's a business. You also want to be making money. You don't want to throw money into something that you don't think is going to turn out well. But that's also the thing. You don't know if it's going to turn out well until you kind of do it. And like, look at The Substance, for example. Who knew a body horror about women's aging bodies would have done as well as he has, like in the box office just this past year alone? And we also have to keep in mind that like things have just changed in general. Like there's less people are going to cinemas. Just in general, people are going to the cinemas less because they have bigger TVs at home, or they're happy to wait a couple months and like for it to be released on streaming. So the way people make movies, fund movies, and then get paid for movies are also different now, which means that the system has to change to make it more sustainable. And it just feels like the system hasn't caught up, or it's because it's run by people who doesn't like movies but are rather more keen on making it a business. So yeah, it's scary. It's some very dark times that we're living in, and to be trying to continue making films. I feel like I could make the argument that the people who will keep going to cinemas will be the cinephiles. People who enjoy the movie experience in a cinema, in a theater, where they're like, I want to watch this on a widescreen, the way it was shot and intended to be. I want to watch this where the sound mix is good. It's not just whatever the quality stereo I could afford at home. I am willing to pay the $12, $14 ticket to go and sit there and commit for 2 hours to this experience made by a group of very passionate individuals, by someone who believe in the story that they want to tell. Like, the people who will keep going to cinemas are going to be the cinephiles. So why won't you fucking make movies for them? So my point is to say that these people will be there. People who love movies will go and watch a movie the way it was shot and intended to be watched. People who will commit to watching The Brutalist in theaters, despite the fact that it's 200 minutes long with an intermission, they will always be there. So why not make movies for them? Sure, maybe they're not the biggest share of the pie, but they'll be there. So why not work with a guarantee, as opposed to like trying to spin off another IP? And I hope to hell there's going to be enough people who want to watch in theaters. He also mentions DVD sales in his speech, and basically what he was kind of referring to was that back in the day, if your indie film doesn't become like a box office hit, the studio is still able to recoup losses by selling DVDs of it. But now in the streaming age, that's not really a thing. And I'll tell you right now, what's a film that we wouldn't have if the studios didn't have that sort of fail-safe for indie films? Fucking Fight Club. Like, we will not have that 94 freaking indie classic if the studio didn't take a chance on it and then be like, okay, you know what? We'll recoup the losses in DVD sales. Indie filmmakers and indie films do not have that right now as an option, as a fallback, as a ways to be like, give us to have a second chance. So yeah, in general, it just does feel like we are heading towards some very dark times for the film and TV industry. Studios are just churning out less stuff. They don't want to take risks because they're like, the stuff that we used to sell in the past isn't selling anymore right now. So what makes you think your indie film is? And it's just like, there is the argument to be made that you could sell, you don't know that, and then you feel bad as the filmmaker as well, because there are people who come and work for you, families that are like that that would need more money to kind of survive, and they're doing it because they love you, or they love the film, or they love the craft, the passion, the story. And when I say stakes, I don't mean just money, but also just like the socioeconomic stuff that's going to weigh on you as a filmmaker, sometimes political. And it's rough and it's hard. And as an indie filmmaker with a film that so-called has no commercial viability, someone who is an artist with a story to tell, it's very scary. It makes me think that it's next to impossible. It makes me think that I can't do it because I'm not born with generational wealth or am particularly well connected and things like that. And just it gets you down. And indie filmmaking has never been easy. I know that, but it does feel particularly difficult in these times where things are changing, but the system hasn't changed to help accommodate the times that have changed, that sort of thing. So it's scary. I hope I can ride it out. I hope I find ways to do it, and I hope I'm not 80 by the time things have changed enough to be able to let me make the films I want to make. Because, yeah, I suppose you're right. God, I hope I figure it out and soon.